So welcome to the node.js package maintenance team meeting for the 6th of July, 2023. We'll follow our standard agenda of looking at what was tagged on the issue created for the agenda. That was issue number 566. Let me find the Google Doc. If everybody can add themselves in as attendees here, that would be great. I'm just going to paste it in the chat. And I'll add myself in. So before we get started, any announcements people would like to share?
Maybe not announcements, but I wrote a blog post last week or the week before that got a bit of attention that I hope folks go check out at blog.vlt.sh. Has to deal with your package JSON, surprising enough. So yeah.
Okay, good for a heads up. I guess the other thing I can just remind people, Collaborator Summit coming up in September. So, people can think about sort of sessions to propose for the Collaborator Summit and to think about if you can make that along with OpenJS World Europe.
Quick question on that, actually,
Yep.
Michael. Do you know if the date has been confirmed or whether it's going to be the day before? Because I didn't see, as I was registering for OpenJS World EU, I didn't see a date for the summit yet.
It has been set, and I haven't registered yet. I'm planning to do that today, actually, but let me find. I'm pretty sure it's the day before, but I don't want to say that unless I'm 100% sure. But I think they're right. Here is the issue for it, which I'll paste into the chat. It says September 18th, which is the day before.
Okay, that's great to know because it just changes my flight plans and stuff. So
yeah, no, yep, agreed. Okay, so moving on. I know we've got just 3 things on the status on the agenda. We did have a quick chat on a couple of them before we started the stream, so we know there's no update on the ESM and CommonJS publishing guidance, and we don't have the people who are working on the next steps for PKGS Create, so we don't have an update on that. So let's dive into the goals for 2023, and I think Darcy, you had some thoughts on that one, right?
Yeah, so I just wanted to be mindful we're already midway through the year, so we've only got about 6 months left, and I'm not sure if we have champions for each one of the items that we had put down. There's 4 that I put into issue 550, so goals for 2023. I commented based on a talk or a session with yourself, Michael, Roy, and I think Rick was there a few weeks back. So there was 3 or 4, I think, projects that I thought this group could tackle. One was definitely the package JSON documentation. Another was sort of the standards or tooling around standards and validation and scaffolding, which I think there's a lot of discussion I know Ethan is driving with standardization or sort of documentation of package JSON in general, and I know he's not here. And then the third one, which I think is the one that I would like to help out with because I did for NPM, is the status board of impactful packages. So that last one, I do think that something quickly could be done, whereas the others, I think that there's going to be a lot of discussion about the keys and the props and the values and things like that. There will be a lot of discussion amongst us, and I think that will go on for a while. And who knows if we'll really get that agreed to, what we consider to be common keys that we think should and shouldn't be set. But the last one specifically, I think, is something that again I'm very bullish on. I think is going to provide a lot of value and help us sort of determine where we should be putting our eye of Sauron against, right? So the impactful projects that we think might only have one maintainer or haven't been published in a while, we can start to sort of pull out the data, look at it on a bi-weekly, weekly cadence or whenever you want, to be generating sort of that data for. So that's the one that I'm interested in. I'm not sure if it makes sense to like set champions for each one of these things, but I see you were the last to actually comment on this, Michael. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that one, like, certainly it makes sense to have like champions. And so like if you're volunteering to try and drive that one, that would make sense for you to champion. The earlier ones, just we can loop back, but the earlier ones like the scaffold and validation tool, I think that's for 58 below, the PKGS create.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay.
I
So I
think
think
Rick had picked that up, but then it kind of fell off. I know. So
right. So I think Ethan is kind of the champion for now, is like the one volunteered for this. The document ecosystem common keys and best practices, right? So that's related to, I think it kind of says its stretch goal is to document best practice around ESM, CGS. So that's kind of related to 542, but I guess that's a much broader initiative, right? Is the like document.
yeah, that might be something we want to punt on. We might want to take a phased approach to the validation, like V2 of the validation tool or like the scaffolding tool could have like baked in our, I guess, thoughts or opinions or standards or best practices on ESM and CJS
right.
scaffolding. I feel like we should start small and yeah, pick out this, because I mean, even with npm in it, this was like always touchy subject. I know Jordan has thoughts and feelings about setting the type key by default and things like that. So yeah.
So on that one, like I'm trying to remember, there's been quite a bit of discussion about documenting the common keys. I guess the common keys is is there an issue, or is the collaboration space been spun up, or has it been doing under Winter CG? I can't quite remember off the top of my head.
Ethan put together a spec which was really like more like he went full on with, I think, a sort of like a, as far as I can tell, W3C type spec draft of common keys for Winter CG, and I think he has an issue or a thread going on over there. So okay. I don't know if that's where
he's opened a repo. He's made a repo under OpenJS. So the intention is to have an OpenJS Foundation collaboration space to work on it. And the last I heard, the primary thing that the group was going to work on was indeed a sort of documentation / registry of commonly used keys to be more informational rather than enforcement or anything. But the idea being that if we can establish that, like, if we can answer the question, what is conflicting, and hey, I'm going to make a new field, like, is it already in use? Like that would be an important first step towards standardization of things. So that's my, I mean, we can wait for Ethan to speak to it, but that's my current understanding.
What was that repo called?
Darcy just put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. I got to refind. For some reason, something closed all my windows.
It's called package JSON research under the OpenJS Foundation.
Yeah, I added it to the notes as well, Michael.
Okay, I'm just trying to yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Okay. Sorry, I'm just finding my, right. Okay, good. Right. So it's basically being driven there. And so I think maybe there's nothing to do. Like if we have 542 and we try to like put together, what kind of guidance could we provide about ESM CGS? And so I think that can happen in parallel, but then we wait for like what comes out of the documenting the keys. I'm not sure there's,
I mean, the CJS ESM stuff, I think, revolves around a very short list of known keys. So I expect that the initial guidance can be written on its own, and that as research uncovers more keys that are related based on various tools, like, oh, this one bundler uses this field and this other bundler uses this field and so on, then we would just flesh that out in the guidance. But initially the guidance, I think, can be pretty straightforward because I think it's relatively understood. I think, well, there are a small number of people who understand it well at the moment.
Yeah, and hopefully we can make it so a few more people understand it based on the guide.
Exactly.
So that sounds, so I mean, I guess what I was poking at is like, there's the two things going under the document ecosystem, common keys and best practices. The one is being driven under the OpenJS Foundation. So I don't know if this group needs to like track or do anything more on that front, other than wait for it to finish. And then we've already got the 542 to cover the guidance. So maybe those two things cover that goal. So Darcy, since you wrote it, maybe you can confirm, yeah, that makes sense or not.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We could update that that comment, or we could put it somewhere else. I'm not sure if we've tried using projects in the past, like project boards, I think, but might be interesting just to put some of these issues in like not jobs to be done, but like just a basic Kanban state. Give a basic state to each one of the items. Like, is it in progress yet? No. Yes. No. What's the status of it? But I know that might be more structure than folks are even willing to do.
I have no objection to somebody doing it, but in terms of the extra work, like if there's a volunteer, sounds good.
Yeah, if it's okay, like I don't know if I have access to create a new projects board.
We have. If not, I can make it for you. In OpenJS at least. Or
we do have, actually, we do already have one. It says general activities. If you go to projects in the package maintenance repo, there are 3 projects that are open right now in the classic view. And there's general activities for 2023, maintenance help, and backlog, a package maintenance roadmap, the 3 boards. And it actually does look like somebody's created the general activities. There's to do, in progress, and then review and done. So this is actually a really good. So like we could say the goals for 2023 is actually done because we've outlined what they are, and then we can just make sure that there's cards for each one of them, right? So I could do that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it might be good to just close out that issue so we feel like we've got some traction.
Yeah,
like
we might.
closing.
I can paste some of these. Like I've just been taking in the minutes some notes, which I think we could like paste in and then close that. The thing I wonder about. It's okay. So I think we can say that, like, you know, the launch scaffolding and validation tool, we believe we've got 458 below, so that's covered. We just talked about document ecosystem, common keys, and best practices, and we can say that like 542 covers is related. You know, so, and then that there's Ethan's putting the repo together with the, maybe I should say collaboration space.
Yeah.
Collaboration space. And so basically the comment can be like, those two cover the work we planned for this year. And then launch impactful packages status board, create new status board. Darcy's interested in this one and we'll take next steps. And
yeah, I'll make a card for it if there isn't one already.
Okay, so I'll make to track progress. And then the last one was document runtime support of package.json. So this is basically move package.json documentation to its own page, which that's within this repo itself.
No, I think this was in the node docs. So
Okay.
I think it's nested right now. There is documentation about the runtime specific keys that Node supports, but it's kind of nested. I think it's hard to find.
And also Node's own docs correctly omit a lot of editorializing about recommendations. And they have some, but it's like, it wouldn't, I think it's better for a separate guide to be able to do that, because then it can say, this is how it works, but here's some of the upsides and downsides, and it can do it like in our package.js guidance. We can do it, I think, without that like official node status, which gives us more leeway in being editorial. I think that's an important thing to have in a guide.
Sounds like a good idea, but I think this one might have been to reorganize what we have to make it more discoverable in the node project.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think it was to move it in the API docs, even though I agree with you, Jordan, that the way that it's framed today, it's just very explicit about like, oh, this is a key we support. Main is.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion about where it lives within the node doc structure, if it's simply just describing what it is and how it works. Yeah, I'm sorry if I derailed a bit.
No, it would be like if you're saying we might also want something in the package maintenance side that has a bit more general, like we're talking about putting some on ESM versus CommonJS, but I think you're thinking
right.
That won't
my
cover...
vision is that, well, my vision is that guide will be linking to the node docs, so
right.
that guide won't necessarily have to explain exactly how the fields work. It will just kind of conceptually describe them and then say, here is, because the node docs are like, here's 1,000 capabilities. And so this will be, here are the use cases we see, and here are our recommendations for each of these use cases and why. And here's links to the references like the node docs if you're interested. And here's some of the trade-offs and upsides and downsides and so on. But like, it's good that the node docs don't have that, but it needs to be somewhere. And that's how I see those two things kind of interoperating. So wherever they live in the node docs, we would be linking to them frequently.
So 542 could end up with some guidance under the package maintenance teams. Do you think we need an additional doc, or is that the doc that would have the more specific recommendations and opinions? And then,
yeah, I'm just sort of envisioning the one doc that's a guide. And then so let me step back a bit. So at the end of all this effort, what I'm expecting is that the node docs are organized for discoverability and continue to describe what the capabilities are and exactly how they work. The package maintenance guide will be, hey, you're publishing a package. Here's a decision tree and some recommendations that'll help you do it right. And here's some trade-offs, and you can make some decisions where those are trade-offs there. And then the package JSON research will be sort of like, if you have a package JSON field name and you want to know what the hell is this, you go there first. And it'll tell you what it is, and it might link you to nodes docs and so on. And it might link you to the package maintenance guide and vice versa. And so these things will all kind of cross-reference in that nodes docs will be specific to node. The package JSON research document will be ecosystem-wide, but not necessarily have use cases or recommendations. It'll just be kind of factual explanations. And then the package maintenance guide will be for NPM package authors.
Yeah, that'll make sense.
And all of these will frequently link to each other. That's like what I have in my head anyway. I don't know if
right. That makes sense to me. So I think like we'll under the document ecosystem common keys and best practices, we have 542, which will be like the package maintenance guide doc. Then this document runtime supported package JSON, that would be back to like, let's reorganize what's in node docs to make it more easy to discover, right?
Right. And if we want, it might make sense to have another package maintenance document that lists runtimes and says, hey, here's nodes docs, here's Denos docs, here's buns docs, and so on. And that way we've gathered it in one place, but each runtime still holds the source of truth for its own documentation. I don't think we want to try and supplant that. But it might indeed make sense to, go ahead.
That could fit into that other doc, like the one with the guidance. It could be at the beginning, like, here's the references to all the runtime ones, and here's our
absolutely.
Doc. But I think that's like, let's write that, and then whether it's one doc, two docs, or whatever.
Exactly right. I like that.
I think there's some cleanup of our docs that we need to do as well. I noticed like some of the docs are suffixed like guidelines. Some aren't. Some are uppercase. Some aren't. So I think that we could probably just do a cleanup of our docs right now for the package maintenance working group, including like the drafts. There's drafts that have been sitting here for quite a long time, 3-4 years, that either should probably get promoted if they're like ready and we agree with them, or they should get.
Agreed. Would be good to go.
And I mean, I think it's fine if there's something, just like in NPM, right? It's fine if there's something that is approved that everybody likes and wants to happen, but like nobody has stepped up to do it yet. Like maybe we make a special label for that, but like it's always good to re-audit those and make sure that that's still the case. But like, I think it is, as long as it's clearly communicated, it's fine to have something that's stalled, but like progressible. Right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like, something can still be a work in progress or not fully thought through. Maybe like you could have partial guidelines, right? Like, because it's literally a guideline, it's not prescriptive, right? So
absolutely.
So I'll volunteer for the sort of focused, let's look at the node docs and see if we can reorganize that. So I'll volunteer to open an issue to cover that. And then like, I think the first thing will be like to make sure we have consensus from collaborators in the project to like centralize it or not. And I'll volunteer for that one, this one. And I think like the documenting the ecosystem common keys and best practices, if I was going to pull out names as possibly having volunteered. I know Jordan, you volunteered to do some work, and I think Luke, you volunteered to do some work on that, right? Like
which one? The keys?
EJS, Common JS ESM guidance.
Right. Yep.
Is that's okay?
So,
I don't want to.
I think So I'm planning I am planning this month on getting something written out, and then Lucas, when I do, I'd love to have your input before I share it with the wider group. And I sort of feel like the issue you just described, Michael, is split between two things. One is like a best practices guide, and the other is the package JSON research initiative. So like maybe that initial thing has been half subsumed by those two efforts.
Right. Like the one goal, I see the part of it's now off, like on its own in the collab space. And
right.
We can just, if we're interested, we could do a periodic review of that, but we don't need to push it as a team. The other thing under that is I think we're covering under 542, where we'll put together some guidance. And so, yeah, I think that I just was repeating what you said to make sure I understood, right? That's what you meant. So I think with that, we have names against each of those four things, which is good.
So we know who to blame in 2024 when nothing is completed.
Well, there's no blame. Everybody's a volunteer, but we've got people who, are hoping to do some work on these things.
I say that knowing I'm the most likely to
right. Well, yeah, I know you're just
be
joking.
slow to get it. Yeah, I'm totally joking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's definitely good. And I guess any other topics or things we should talk about while we're together this week?
I just wanted to say, I noted this before we jumped on the call, but there's a good back and forth, I think, going with Wesley Todd from Netflix. I know Jordan's in that thread, but in the Slack channel for the package JSON research. So aligning with the work that Ethan's championing and the OpenJS working group, ideally, or I guess collab space on package JSON. There's a Slack channel, package-JSON-research, and Wes was putting some thoughts around how we can frame our group, our hive mind thoughts around package JSON, just because there's an RFC currently open by the folks at PNPM to add templating. So this is very in line with what we're considering in terms of building some tooling around validation and creating some standards around templating of package JSON. And so I had jumped in on that RFC. I think Jordan is getting caught up and reading through it as well right now. And yeah, just wanted to note that there's some good discussion going on there. So
what was the Slack channel again? It's
package-JSON-research it's in the OpenJS Foundation Slack org.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wanted to write that specifically.
I'll put a link to the thread in the chat as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I agree with what Wes is saying. Like, if we can approach some of these discussions, because like there's a lot happening in the ecosystem for sure. Like, in a lot of tools that touch package JSON those authors that aren't necessarily jumping into these kinds of forums where they're like willing to discuss the impacts of creating net new keys or configuration in package.json, which I think obviously we always want to try to like avoid redundancy and duplicative efforts. I think at least my time at NPM, we were really concerned about that. I know Roy is concerned about that. And going forward, we want to make sure that like, if there's a new key or new configuration, like, does it make sense? Like, especially what they were suggesting was introducing sort of variables or I think creating some sort of extension mechanism for package.json, which I think really blows out, like, it could be kind of dangerous, I think, for the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of security and usability considerations for things like that, and there's a reason. Like NPM had a lot of discussions around similar concepts, and it never materialized, and there's a reason it didn't. So it's like, it is definitely a good idea to encourage all the various stakeholders to communicate as much as possible.
Yeah, because we don't have a standard definition for package.json. We can't point to that and say, hey, it's supposed to be a static config. It's not supposed to be something that's dynamic. You know, it's supposed to be this, but we can't point to that today. I think that's the problem.
Or here's why those things are critical to maintain. Right.
Yeah, and is it like, it just makes me think of the TC39 model where, like, do you need a couple people to implement it to address those kind of issues where, like, hey, this could be a ton of work for somebody, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, any standard is, or specification, right, is just a piece of paper until people agree to implement it and follow it. So like TC39 only matters because, you know, Node and the browser companies and the few others like agree to follow it. Yep. And similarly speaking, if we make a standard, right, like we need NPM and the other CLIs to follow it. We need Node and the other runtimes to follow it, right? And the more that do, the more standard it is, and the more pressure everyone else has to conform. But like in the absence of that, like, I mean, anyone can write up a document and be like, here's a standard, and you know, it just, you know, it's just an XKCD reference at that point.
Well, I think the beginning steps are there in terms of like documenting what's out there is a good. So it's good to see that collaboration space spinning up and starting by documenting things and having a place where people, like, even if the conversations went there, like, hey, I want to add this new field, and people knew to watch that as a place to look for those.
Then they can discover the discussions that way. Absolutely. Exactly,
right? Like other people will be like, hey, well, wait a second, this has been discussed already over here, right? Or whatever, right? But like, bringing the discussions into one place adds some pretty good value just to start with.
Agreed.
Okay, any other things people want to mention or things we should chat about?
Nope.
Okay. Well, if not, thanks for everybody's time, and we'll see you in GitHub and